man with a dream, a reverie. I was grappling in my life with, what does it mean to be really free? So I decided to play a little game with myself. Okay, Helena, pretend you're free. Imagine the whole world is yours. Go, do anything, anywhere. Slowly, words bubbled up into my consciousness, and I heard St. Louis, Missouri. St. Louis, Missouri. Of all the glorious places on this planet, I get St. Louis, Missouri. I love the ocean, and Missouri's some landlocked place. And the only thing I know about St. Louis, it has this golden arch. Then an image bubbles out, and I see myself running through the gateway arch in St. Louis. I'm looking for more freedom in my life, and the best I can do is run through half of McDonald's. The light bulb goes off in a bit, and I realize my grandfather's name is Luigi Code. In Italian, that's Louis of the Saints, St. Louis. Now, I believe stories are alive, and they call us to them. Is that you, Papa Luigi? Is this something I'm supposed to unravel here? What's the story? I've always been ambivalent, reticent about telling Papa Luigi stories. But whenever I think of him, I often remember an old photograph we had in the family that intrigued me. It was taken in 1913, and in it, there's Papa in a big swansea tie, standing among a group of men, women, and children at what looks like a Sunday afternoon in East Park, Worcester, Massachusetts. I was young when I found the picture and asked my mother about it. Well, these are a group of anarchists, and we don't talk about them very much. Papa Luigi was one of them. See that man there? That's Bartolomeo Vanzetti. And when he came to Worcester, he stayed with Nana and Papa one time. A few years later, he and another man, Niccolo Sacco, were arrested for robbery and murder. A lot of people believe they were innocent, but they were really arrested because of their beliefs and for being immigrants. A lot of people from all over the world tried to save them, but in the end, they were executed. I was 8. I heard the words. Recently, I was at a small gathering with people I just met, and I happened to mention this photograph I had of my grandfather with Vanzetti. Turns out I'm speaking to a historian whose specific focus is the Sacco and Vanzetti case, and that currently he's looking at the year Vanzetti spent in Worcester, the year he very well may have been radicalized, 1913. What are the chances? Is that you again, Papa? Then the historian excitedly says, it's your moral imperative to find that picture. Okay, Papa, the call is getting louder. Now I feel I have to tell the stories. At that point, I become exquisitely aware that I might not have much time left to ask my mother about those old days. She's 97 and in St. Patrick's nursing home. Her memory was great until she was about 90, but these past few years have taken their toll. People and events, times, all cascade. I think she knows me, mostly. But on that day, when I wanted to eke out whatever yet I could about the old times, she was clear. And again, a little girl at her father's knee. I loved his ideas. I used to sit in the little room with him. My sisters and brothers always wanted to go out and play, but I loved to sit there with him where he would read Dante and Zola and listen to Verdi and then tell me all about them. But when I grew a little older, I saw how different he was from all the other fathers, and I got upset. I wanted him to be like the other fathers, the ones who went to church. She saw me taking notes. What are you doing? Are you writing this down? Are you going to tell this to anybody? Who are you going to tell? 97, when dementia wreaks havoc with her memory, when she may or may not remember her husband and her children still, the fear is palpable. She lets me know this is not a story to be told out loud. Little aside here, I don't know why I should be surprised that the fear is palpable. My mother, like all the women in our family, worshipped at the temple of fear. Everything was dangerous. As kids growing up, none of us could have bikes. Bikes go on streets. You die. Not just streets, water, heights, go for a swim, you're going to sink and die. Climb something, fall, die. If you're going to leave the house, they're going to attack you. Yes. You stay home, they're going to break in and attack. Maybe one relatively safe thing to do. That would be lying down and resting. I think the idea is, if you're not moving, you're okay. As long as there's motion, something might happen. So if you're not moving, you're okay. But the other side of that is, if you're not moving, you're already dead. Back to St. Patrick's on Monday. So I tried to say, Mom, you don't have to be afraid. It's okay now. That was a long time ago. She looked at me. It's okay now? Really? And I thought, I don't really know if it's okay, even now. So now what? To tell or not to tell? About Luigi? My memories of him are scattered. I remember how he looked. A trim, elegant man, not clothes elegant, but in his presence elegant. Dark, full mustache, and lively, twinkling eyes, and dark wavy hair that hardly grayed through his 70s, 80s, 90s. Papa was 99, 3 months short of his 100th birthday when he died. I remember a gentleman. Papa loved to fish, but he didn't use a bait or a hook. He didn't want to hurt the fish. The beauty of a fishing is enough in catching the fish. Oh, I remember that time in Florida. He was mugged. He must have been about 90 years old. Some punks knocked him down, stole his wallet. Maybe he had $5. Why they knocked me down? If somebody asks me for money, they needed it more than I do. I give it to them. Why they knock me down? I remember the family compound we grew up in Worcester, Massachusetts, where those 3-deckers sprouted up everywhere at the turn of the last century. There was our 3-decker with Nana and Papa on the first floor, Auntie Jo on the second, we were on the third. Uncle Igor was in a little house next to the 3-decker, and Auntie Bina moved into her mother-in-law's house on the second floor across the street, and everybody cried when Auntie Anna moved away. 1 mile down the road. I remember the family was in such a hurry to assimilate, to become American as soon as possible. The chant was, don't speak Italian to the kids. Only Papa resisted. He said Italian was la più bella lingua del mondo. And he didn't want to ruinare la bocca, ruin his mouth. Parlando italiano è come si canta. Speaking Italian is like singing. But actually the family was happy Papa didn't speak very much English. That way they wouldn't be able to understand all those things he was saying. Who's they? Papa liked simple things. Food, healthy, fresh, not those thick Sunday gravies with the prosciutto and meatballs and sometimes pork thrown in to make it even thicker. No, for Papa, simple marinara sauces with tomatoes that literally leapt from our garden into the pan, onto the plate. I remember watching the templates. Papa would prepare one of his favorite dishes, l'arancia sotto l'acqua, oranges on the water. I thought, bland food about this, but I would be transported as I would watch him peel an orange, pepper it with his knife, slice it into rounds, lay it on a platter, a little water, and then he would eat it. But it wasn't just eating. There was something. I remember Papa's little room. Oh, no, I forgot to tell you. 50 years later, I was with a group, we were in La Bella Sicilia, Sicily, and we were in a restaurant where we were served blood oranges in an exquisitely flavored water. Well, with my first bite, the taste sensation was such that I had an epiphany. Oh, Papa, now I know the difference between the name of something and the essence of the thing itself. Orange. I remember Papa's little room, the same one my mother sat in with him. This seemed the place that held the seeds of what made Papa different. There were stacks of Italian newspapers and books in Italian, among them his treasured volume, Dante Alighieri's, and I can almost hear Papa's voice as he would proclaim, La Divina Commedia. On Saturday afternoons, the Metropolitan Opera broadcast live into Papa's living room. La Traviata was his favorite opera, and he loved to quote Giuseppe Verdi, who said the three most important things in life. Il pane, right, everybody, l'amore, e la musica. Sometimes we hear those scratchy old records playing Victrola. Who's that, Papa? Enrico Caruso. The cellar was where Papa engaged in his cabinet-making craft. And because he was an artisan, he was known as Master Luigi. I remember the stacks of woods and the tools and small, large tools that he used to make bureaus and chests and benches, everything for his grandchildren and his children. And of course, there were those endless jars of canned tomatoes that assured we had that summer sunburn taste all winter long. Now, Papa coveted very little. He loved his cigars, those Panatellas and Coronas, the cheaper the better. You could give Papa no better gift than those cigars. We tried. Papa, here's a new sweater. I'm a gutter sweater. Papa wore old clothes, clean, but always the same clothes. Money I needed to ensure. So people would say, Master Luigi, you wear the same thing all the time. Why don't you buy some new clothes? You could look better. Now, our Italian community was fairly contained at the time, so Papa said, it's a me, Luigi. Now, why I gotta change? Why? I gotta make a show? Everybody here knows me. One day, some people from Worcester went to the big city to visit Boston. And who should they see? Coming the other way toward them on Washington Street. None other than Master Luigi dressed in the same old clothes. Master Luigi, what are you doing dressed like that? You're in the bigger city now. It's a me, Luigi. Well, why I gotta change? Why? I gotta make a show? Nobody here knows me. Some of these stories I remember, some my mother told me. Once she said, "You always wanted me to tell you the family stories," and I would tell them, but I added more, and I would always make them nice. Okay, stop, wait a minute, another aside here. What do we really know about the stories we hear? My mother has her memories, I have mine. Memories are not facts. On top of that, she tells me she's adding to them, making them nice. On top of that, I'm listening to them filtering through my 8-year-old, 12, 20, 40, 60-year-old mind. She's, on top of that, she's telling the same stories at different ages and sensibilities in her life. So, what's the story? Papa Luigi was born in Bisceglie Bari, Provincia di Bari, in Italy, 1879. The firstborn son, Maria and Pasquale de Santis, followed by 2 brothers, Emanuele and Armando. The boys always agreed that their father, an educated man, a customs official, was a beautiful father. He brought us places, he bought us things, he spent time with us. When Luigi was 19, he went into the Italian Navy, reluctantly, we were told. And he came back filled with these anarchist ideas that had been sweeping Italy in the latter half of the 1800s. Aside, what I've come to learn about anarchism is that it's not what is commonly thought, all about social disorganization and chaos, every man for himself. Central to anarchism is the belief that social cooperation and organization are natural, that people are essentially good, but are corrupted by the very institutions they create. It's the belief in individual freedom and the rejection of any authority, individual, church, state, government, corporation that seeks to exploit and dominate. Anarchism believes that if we can truly create an egalitarian society without extremes of wealth and poverty, and join hands across boundaries to cooperate, work, and play, then there'd be no need for police and prisons, armies, and wars, because the underlying causes of those will be gone. So that was the philosophy Papa was developing all through his 20s. He would say, per il potere, l'ammazza l'umanità. For power, they will destroy. When Papa was 29 years old, he married 22-year-old Marianina Marusa. Papa didn't have a single lira in his pocket, so Marianina had to pay for the honeymoon hotel. They had eloped because her family was eyeing some other man for her, and she'd have none of that. Now here's one story that got shifted as I got older. It seems that Nana and Papa never did get married when they eloped. You see, Papa didn't believe in the institution of marriage. At that time, the woman had to promise to obey the husband. What? He owns her, there's no freedom, you don't own anyone. But the social stigma for Marianina of living in sin was a little much, and she wanted to get married. So Papa got caught in that creative tension between what was ideal and what you could actually be practical, what you could live out given the prevailing social norms. So Papa relented, and he went to get the license, but he was adamant he would not go into the church. Neighbors finally convinced him to let the priest come to the house. It's been told that the priest whispered to Papa, I believe like you, let's please Marianina. Papa never wanted to admit he'd been married by a priest. For him it was always, church no good. Christ good. Church no good. When I was going to receive First Communion, I asked my mother, why doesn't Papa like the priests in the church? Well, he thinks that they don't tell the truth to the people. Papa believes that the priests, like the politicians, will lie to the people to keep them ignorant so that they can have more control over them. But when I grew up, I was curious. I went to check out the churches for myself, and I would come back and say, Pa, they're good. And he'd say, no, we'd argue. But he never stopped us from believing whatever we wanted to. A generation later, sometimes we grandchildren would dare to taunt Papa. We could get a fire going. All we had to do was mention church. Papa, church is good. Church no. Papa, when you go by church, you bow your head like this. No, I go like this. Soon after Nana and Papa were married, they came to this country. My mother conceived in Italy, was born here in 1910. Now, there's a certain pattern for naming children in Italian families. Firstborn son named after the paternal grandfather, secondborn son after the maternal grandfather, firstborn daughter after the paternal grandmother, secondborn daughter after the maternal grandmother. You keep going like that, and when you run out of parents on both sides, you start naming after aunts and uncles. Now, you don't need to get into this, but it's only interesting if sometimes you've ever wondered why in Italian families so many first cousins have the same names, like Anthony or Dominic or a bunch of Marias or Angelinas. Well, Papa kept to this pattern to begin with. My mother, named after Papa's mother, Maria. Second-born daughter after Marianina's mother, Giuseppina. That's Josephine, my Auntie Jo. But by the time the third daughter comes, Papa begins to choose names more reflective of his stance in life. Now, nature is a wonder, never to be taken for granted. Like the sun rising every morning, a brand new miracle. Che bella cosa, una giornata il sole. And so third daughter becomes Alba. Translation, dawn. In the diminutive, Albina, my auntie. Fourth daughter comes. Papa goes further out on the left. We always called her Auntie Artie for short because her name is Artea, A-R-T-E-A, or so we thought. It seems the name Papa gave her had no R in it. It was A-T-E-A, Atea, translation, atheist. Now, family had to do something with a name like that to not make it be what it was. So they slipped in that little extra R, wrote A-R-T-E-A. Funny thing is, when they spoke her name, you see, we're from Massachusetts, we don't pronounce R's that come after A's. You know, park the car in the Harvard yard. So in actuality, before they changed her name, she was Auntie Artie. After they changed it, she was Auntie Artie. See, now she's got a nice name. Happily, fifth born child was a long-awaited son, my Uncle Lito. We would laugh as kids because his name translates as Uncle Book, or so we thought. This is the story we heard later. When my uncle was born, Bob proudly wrote to his father, "Now I have a son, and I have given him your name, Pasquale De Santis." Pasquale wrote back, "This is a new time. Why give him such an old-fashioned name? Give him a new name." So Papa dashed off to City Hall to change the baby's name. He returned home and announced to Maria Nina, "The baby's new name is Libero Solo. I am free." Now, once again, you can't show your stripes. It's 1919, so the family has to do something. But this time, instead of putting a letter in, they pull one out. When you take the E out of Libero, you get Libra. So now, instead of Uncle Book, we have a much more acceptable Uncle Instead of it, we have a much more acceptable Uncle Book instead of Uncle I am free. Now, Papa and his fellow compatriots were of a similar inclination when it came to naming their children. There was another I am free in that community, and two of my mother's closest friends were Ora and Idea, now and ID. And I can imagine when there might be Sunday gatherings in the park and it was time to call the children. And come on, you kids, the time to eat. Come on, get over here. Hey, I am free. Atheist, done. Now, I am free. Get over here now. The years 1910 to 1920 were difficult ones for immigrant families. The children were growing, and it became harder and harder to make ends meet. Now, there's always been a question about Papa's relationship to work. We'd hear things in the family like when you go, find that a busted his hump. Or he was always down the cellar, futzing around making picture frames. Nana used to yell at him to get off the couch, and he'd say, "Leave me alone," and then nails in my head. What we know Papa loved to do was to talk intently with like-minded friends, have a cigar, read a book, listen to opera. His friends, people would say, "Mr. Luigi, you do such a good woodwork. Why don't you make something, sell it? You could make more money." Then what I'm doing? Then you bring some people in to work, or where do you work before you start the business and make more money? Then what? You keep growing the business, it gets so big you really make it. Then what? And then when you make enough money, you sell the business or do whatever you want to do. You telling me I gotta stop doing what I'm doing now so I can end up doing what I'm doing now. God did have a particular attitude to him. He would say, bisogna lavorare a piacere. It's necessary to work a piacere, as it pleases you, as you will, as the creative juices flow. He loved to walk slowly, pas moved, measured, as if his body was speaking. Whatever needs to get done, will get done in its own time. But now wait a minute. Let's be fair. There's another side here. Sometimes it's, what do you mean, a piacere? We gotta get the food on the table, and now. That was Marianita. She was scary. All the kids in the neighborhood were afraid of Marianita. Her house yard impeccable. You could do this anyway in Marianita's house. Unnatural. One day their mischievous son-in-law, my Uncle Vito, created havoc in the family when he scoops from outside there. And one like this to Marianita's doorstep. What's that? Bottom line, Marianita worked hard inside the house and sometimes took jobs outside the house to make sure food got on the table and out. She was the pragmatist to the father's visionary. And together, DeSantis' life was formed in that creative tension between the two. Something else to consider when we talk about that decade 1910 to 1920. All across this country, there were increasing numbers of agitations, riots, strikes against horrific working conditions. There was violence on both sides. Anarchist bombings, attempted bombings, unprovoked attacks on striking workers in Pueblo, Colorado, unprovoked massacre of striking miners. In Massachusetts, the Lawrence textile strike, where women marching in the street along with their children were clubbed down by the police, spreading hysteria during that whole time. The Red Scare, hundreds of radicals captured, deportations, false accusations of murder. In that climate, anarchists were routinely blackballed. It was a tactic companies used to control it. One day, Papa went to look for work. He was a big manufacturing town, shouldn't be so difficult. And he didn't come home at the end of the day. The family got upset. Where is he? Where could he be? The unspoken questions were, was he speaking? Were the police there? Did anybody hear him? Just so happened somebody in the family was walking on Elm Street where the old library used to be. And there, through the glass windows, they see Papa sitting at one of those long tables. He'd spent the day reading. No job. But the question remains, lazy or black? It was 1920. My mother was 10 years old when Sacco Vanzetti was first arrested for robbery. She said, until then, I used to love his ideas. His voice would go right through me, and I would defend him. I wanted to be an anarchist too. We'd go to the parade and sing, Viva l'anarchia e la libertà. But I was young and innocent. When she grew a little older, my mother told me she became more afraid. I hated it when he went with that crowd too much. I was afraid he was more for them than for us. He wasn't so faithful to the cause as those others. Well, he was faithful, but he wasn't a leader. I think he liked to listen to the speeches. Maybe he made remarks, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if he were arrested and I was too young to grasp it. By the time she was 15 or 16, she said she really took it. I told him not to wear that flouncy tie anymore. That was a signal you were anarchist. People were getting arrested just for wearing that tie. And there was that man in Chicago who didn't take his hat off when they played the Star Spangled Banner. They shot him, and the people cheered. I was afraid one night they would be banging at the door. My mother was 17 in 1927 when worldwide efforts to save Sacco and Vanzetti failed. And And what are the chances? Exactly 80 years ago today, August 23rd, 1927, Sacco and Mazzetti were executed. And Edmund St. Vincent Millay wrote, "Justice denied in Massachusetts." All during that time, something else was happening in the DeSantis household. 4 lovely daughters were blossoming, and the boys began to notice. Now, we know Papa believed in freedom. And of course, that has to include amore. Love, consensual, natural, free, consensual, no domination, no exploitation. But here again, Papa's caught that creative tension between the ideal and what you can actually live on. Amore libero, sì, but for the DeSantis daughters, first you got engaged, then you went out on a date, chaperoned by at least 2 daughters, 2 sisters. As for Papa himself, he loved. Something I haven't told you about Papa's cellar. There were piles of Lucas College magazines. I found out recently from my cousin Frank that Papa actually introduced his grandsons to his collection. Nudity was art, natural, therefore beautiful in all its forms. He'd say, "See, she's a beautiful, she's beautiful, he's beautiful, she's beautiful, and you're beautiful, all beautiful." Papa even commissioned his oldest grandson, my cousin Jim, to help him operate the projector he put in there, so together they could watch Nudist Colony movies. And Papa did make art out of all those beautiful magazine cutouts he had of nudes. And he had to display them in all those picture frames he had hanging around his side. In his later years, Papa would winter in Miami Beach long after my grandmother had died. He actually lived for about over 30 years past her death. One winter, word came back that he was seeing a certain woman from Canada, and that he had invited her to visit Worcester one spring. Her name was Adrian. Now, she knew French, little English, she knew Italian, little English. They had a few words in common. Papa sent his sons-in-law, Uncle Vito and Uncle Angelo, along with one of his other grandsons, to meet Adrian at the Greyhound restaurant. When they got there, they saw this fashionably dressed woman standing there, elegant, cigarette holder in her hand, puffing away a la garde. They looked at each other. No way. So they rode around the block looking for someone else. Second time around, she's still the only one standing there. Can't be. They rode around for a 3rd time. Finally, they sent Louis out to check. Is your name Adrian by any chance? There was a general furor among Luigi's children. I'm not going to let some hussy into my house. How does it look to have an 85-year-old father consorting with some strange woman? And anyway, if they can't talk to each other, what are they doing? Only my mother welcomed Adrian to her home for dinner and dared to ask this elegant woman, "What do you see in my father?" "He is a true gentleman. He takes me to the symphonies and to the opera. He is a man of culture. We understand each other without speaking." Seems there were others besides Adrian. We only found this out years later when we were having a DeSantis cousins get-together and began to reminisce about Papa. Cousin Karen said, "I was at this large holiday party and I heard some stranger talking about this elderly gentleman, Master Luigi, who had built a reputation with the women in Florida and had even taken his younger brother, Emmanuel, to join him on his adventure. When I went up to him, I said, 'Who are you? You're talking about my grandfather. How do you know this?'" Mind you, Papa's been dead at least 12 years at this point. Then Karen tells us that she had been Papa's scribe translator for letters coming back and forth from Canada and Adrian. That was my secret with Papa. Wait a minute, said my other cousin Louis. That was my secret. But her name wasn't Adrian. She lived in Barbados. Wait a minute, said Cousin Jim. I got you all beat. I went to visit Papa one winter in Florida. He told me not to tell anyone. I went to pick him up in the convertible I was driving. I figured nice grandson, grandfather ride. He was with the woman. I opened the front door for them to get in. Papa started. No, 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 no. You put the topper down. We going back. Papa, it's going to be cold with the top down. No, 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 no. L'aria fresca, fresh air, nice. And you put the topper down. We go in the back. How do you think I felt? I'm the chauffeur while my grandfather's hugging and kissing someone in the backseat of an open convertible. I was 25. He was 8. He wanted to be younger. And he was. In 1974, when Papa was 95, he wrote to his newly married grandson and namesake, Louis DeSantis. Carissimi sposi, dearest religions, viva l'amore, amore sempre amore. And then he wrote, così il mondo si sta cambiando e avremo più libertà. This way, the world will keep changing and we will have more freedom. As the years went on, Papa spoke less and less of his ideas, though from time to time he'd make a remark or shake his head at closed-mindedness and injustice. He lived a long, simple life, guided by his ideals, but ever mindful of the times in which he lived, free but practical. So, now where am I in this story? Still present to my mother's don't tell. One day, I found some ragged pieces of paper on which Papa had written lists and lists of names. Some were obvious. Michelangelo, Da Vinci, Verdi, Toscanini, Dante, Tolstoy, Pirandello, Ugo, Fermi, Meucci, Galileo, Darwin, Einstein. There were socialist, libertarian, anarchist names. Some I knew, some I had to look up. Karl, Marx, Engels, Lenin, Bakunin, Cafiero, Tresca, Galliani. And he'd written Cristo, San Francesco, St. Francis, Eleanor Roosevelt, Thomas Jefferson, Abramo. Reading all those names was fine. It wasn't until I looked up some names of 16th century unorthodox thinkers who said, martyrs to the cause of free thought, that something happened in my body. I felt fear take a gripping hold. You know, sometimes you just don't get it until you get it. Like the orange. I knew before that people get killed for speaking freely. But in that moment, it became what it must have been for my mother at the time of Sacco and Vanzetti. Visceral and immediate. People get killed. Is that what happened to Sacco and Vanzetti, martyrs to the cause of free thought? Is that what my family thought could actually happen to our Papa Luigi? And how many other families lived in that kind of terror? How many still do? And you know, feel like that can spread in families, generalize it, so that it becomes not just the fear for your own physical safety, but how about the fear that you'll be rejected simply for being different, for being outside the mainstream? Or the fear that who you are and what you believe will be reduced to some label, maybe, and a misunderstood one at that, as in my grandfather's case, Italian or anarchist, which for some is the same word as radical, dangerous radical, or bomb thrower. Yes, there were those who were violent, but that's not the whole story. There is a difference between what was done in the name of anarchism and anarchism itself. And no, we're none of us reducible to little boxes. And what about the fear that you'll be thought foolish or dismissed as Pollyannish because what you want to say is so simple. You are beautiful. It's about love, not taking advantage, not bullying each other. It's about laughing and crying together, having work and play be as one. Isn't it something how powerful stuff like fears gets passed down through the generations? All this time, my reticence to talk about Papa has been about my mother's fear trapped in me. Time to unravel the fear. Time to use its fierce energy to step into courage. Time to step out of that old program and into greater degrees of freedom. All through my teen years, I used to have this recurring dream. It was really a nightmare. In it, Papa was the gatekeeper for our compound. And every morning he'd raise up this gate-like arch, and all the children would run through to go out and play. When it came time to come back, we'd all run through, but every time, before I could get back, Papa would slam down the arch, and I would be stuck outside. Papa, why do you leave me out here? Why won't you let me come home? I knew he loved me. It was very distressing, recurring over and over. I never understood it at the time. I grew up and I forgot. Now, as I recall my St. Louis reverie, and I see myself running through the gateway arch, I realize that that nightmare has become a guiding vision. I can see Papa's smiling face. Stay out some more. You don't have to run home so soon. Go be free. Speak that. Yes, I know. Home is nice and safe, but also too tight. Don't be afraid. Coraggio. Remember, courage means to speak your mind with all your heart. Some people will like it. Some people don't like it. Go tell the story. What's in the story? You free, whatever story you want. Go, tell, go. Mama, I just told the story, and it is really okay. Thank you, Papa. Ti amo.